Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, as you know, this week we have organized a series of lectures on development studies. And you all know, development is marred by different conflict in the society. And the Indian society has witnessed a number of conflicts. The entire country, starting from the north to south, east to west, we find in Jammu Kashmir different conflict, in northeast different conflicts, in the central India we have another kind of country. So there are different sort of conflict we find in the Indian society. So how this have given a shape to our country and also having impact on the development, we will talk all this about. But firstly we will see how the changing contour of conflict in India and in the field of social, political, economic, and also in the also we'll like to explain in the recent we have witnessed state versus civil society. So our more concern on these issues, and for discussion on this very topic we have in the studio Dr. Satish Kumar. He is presently assistant professor in Central University, Haryana, and he is a known columnist. He writes for different newspaper and journals. So I hope his knowledge will help us to understand this topic in a new perspective. So on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Kumar for a research lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is once again a very important and pertinent theme on which we are going to discuss about the changing contours of conflict. As we all know that since the building of the nations, which has started after independence, since then a number of changes have taken place in the field of politics, in the field of social sphere, and in economic areas as well. So we will try to identify all these spheres and how, with the evolutions and in the process of nation building, a system has developed a conflicting situations. But let's first identify what is conflict. The conflict takes place in every society, in every country. Without conflict, the development of a nation is not possible. A conflict is defined of an opposing ideas between two people or more than two groups within the society for ideas, for beliefs, for needs, and many other factors. And they contest, they struggle each other. So some of the conflicts are peaceful, some of the conflicts are violent. When there is a space for reconciliations, agreement, and compromise, then the chances of a peaceful conflicts turning to be violent becomes less and less. But when the communication system of resolving the conflict becomes minimal, then there is always chances of getting inflated in a violent conflict. So we will talk all about the conflict in the spheres of social, economic, and political, and we will also try to identify what are the mechanisms for resolving the conflict. So we will be speaking in specific terms with India, but the conflict is not a merely which takes place in the different spheres of India, but the whole world is a conflict prone. There are many other countries where the political crisis or economic crisis in terms of conflict have become so deepened that it has threatened some of the countries on the verge of being declared as a failed nation. Pakistan, our neighbor, is one of the example. Nepal is also struggling, and not only Nepal and Pakistan, but many developed countries. America is also facing a conflict. Many European countries are also going through a deep crisis, which could be analyzed the conflict of interest among the different groups of the people. So conflict is basically a larger concept, and it is understood to be a mechanism where the interest of conflicts create a situation in which each group wants to have more power. So the basic component and the regions of conflict is power. Either the power in economic terms, or the power in the political terms, or they want to have dominance, hegemony. In the language of Gramsci, we can analyze that a particular section of the society hegemonize the state according to their own ideas, and dictate that also germinate a conflict in the society. So it is an ideological issue, it is a political issue, it is a social issue, as well as an economic issues. So let us see in the specific terms of India how the process of a nation building started in India. The process of nation building was started with the vision of Nehru. As we all know that the Congress party, which Gandhiji wanted to dismantle, because it was a linchpin, it was an organization which has created this nation. And in fact, the Congress party was an organization which has an amalgamations of all kinds of ideas, from extreme left to extreme right. So it has tried to accommodate a different point of views. So when the government was formed under the leadership of Nehru, there was a different conflict within that government itself. Some of them belong to extreme right, some of them belong to extreme left, and they accordingly wanted to build their nation on their ideas. But gradually the power has come into the hands of Nehru, especially after the death of the Home Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister of India, the Iron Man, Vallabhbhai Patel. And Nehruvian ideology has prevailed either in the economic policy, or the foreign policy, or in other spheres of governance. So, if you read the thought of Nehru, the writings of the Nehru, the books which have been written by different historians that analyze the concept of Nehru, that he wanted a socialist pattern, though he was a staunch believer, and he had a very strong tilt towards erstwhile Soviet Union's economic structure. So somehow directly or indirectly his influence has also impacted on the Indian economic structure, and the way it has been framed, it has given a lot of power to the state, and giving a lot of power to the state has definitely neglected certain sections of the society, and a conflict has germinated between a center and some of the areas which in the period of time remain affected by the mainstream centrist approach of the Indian government, and major conflict which germinates, which develops in some of the areas which still continues to haunt the Indian state. And one of them is Seven Sister of Northeast India. As we have been reading, since 1952 the problem started in Nagaland, then Manipur, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, and almost all the seven sisters got involved in a wave of a violent conflict. So, why did it take place? If we go between the lines of the policies of the government, then we realize that the policies which were being meant to include the all periphery into the center under the framework of a federal structure got somehow and some way derailed. Center started the looking at the big issues, heavy industrializations, a development which was initiated by the center, and fortunately or unfortunately the political system which was built in India that represents the Middle Kingdom. Middle Kingdom means all the important states of North. That has created an imbalance of power. As I said in the beginning, that the major reason of conflict is uneven sharing of power. If one community or one set of political or regional configurations feels that they have been undermined, they have been sidelined by the policies of the government, then it develops a conflicting situations, and this conflicting situation tends to divide the country into two different parts, and their agenda does not match with the agenda of the nation state. So still we have been hearing, we have been watching the violent activities which take place off and on in the northeastern states. The same situation could be perceived in Jammu and Kashmir. What is the major reason of the conflict? There is an impact of the outside. Outsiders have been also playing an important role, and that could be analyzed in other way. That when the society becomes divided, the external powers try to exert their own agenda to inflare the conflict in India. So this is another reason which we'll be discussing in detail about the reasons and consequences of the conflict. But let's first understand that India is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious and a multi-identity and nation state which became independent in 1947, 15th August 1947. Since then, the process of nation building started. When the process of nation building started, the major issues of language have become a major bone of contention. If we read the debate in the Constituent Assembly, how the country should be divided for administrative structure, the division of the state became a matter of conflict. Prime Minister, including the other big political leaders, the framers, those who framed the constitution, wanted desperately that division of the state on creation of the new state should be based on the administrative convenience. But they had a feeling that it might be possible the central government will impose on them a single language policy, and that is the policy of Hindi, that will dilute their regional identity. So a national identity has become a matter of conflict for the certain states. So a movement, a political and social movement started in that region. One of the leaders, after 53 days of satyagraha, passed away in a jail. That inflamed the movement, and finally the government came under severe pressure to adopt the division and creation of the new state on the language. So this conflict was resolved for the time being, but continued to develop over time in other parts of the country. Northeastern state again became a matter of bone of contention, how it should be divided. Should it be divided on the policy of administrative comforts, or it should be divided on the policy of reason and ethnic identity? Once again, government had to compromise, and the wishes of the regional leaders were their self-motivated agenda dominated over the national concept in all 7 states. This formula continued even after independence for 30 to 40 years. Only in the 2000, when 3 new states were created, it was created on the basis of administrative regulations. The bigger states had a lot of problems in their far-flung areas to administer better. So Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Uttarakhand were created on these grounds, where the language was not a major issue. So still in India, the problem of language has not been wiped out completely. It still plays a very important role. But with the systematic change through the technology and through other methods, this conflict has become less important. Other major importance or major subjects of conflict have developed in the last 20 to 30 years, and we can identify them in a number of ways. So we will try to focus on the changing contours of a conflict. On the social front, we can identify that the Indian identity or symmetry was based on the caste. That was the primordial identity of the Indian people. They were known by the caste identity. And we had seen a violent conflict which took place in the late 80s and the beginning of 90s, when the policy of reservation was implemented. The whole hog of India, especially the North India, was divided into pro-reservation group and anti-reservation group. It continued for some time. Later on, it died down with a compromise. But still, this policy of reservations create a conflicting situation in our state. Recently, when our government tries to bring social justice, in the process of create egalitarian social order, the government has to accommodate the left out group, the weaker section of the society, through the process of reservations. So the kind of policy when it was being framed under the new education policy, in which in medical and IITs and IIMM, government try to accommodate certain seats on the basis of reservations. There was huge and spontaneous revolt by other sections of the society. So here, once again, the interest of conflict germinates and develops conflicting situations in a state level or at a national level. And this process seems to continue unless and until a balance through a proper governmental policies are sketched. It cannot be possible that the conflict is going to die down. Recently, we have seen a clash of interest between civil society and a state. Why did it take place? And what are the major factors of conflict between society and state? As we all know, we study in sociology and political science that a human being, he lives in a society as well as in the state. As a human being, we live in a society, and as a citizen, we live in a state. There is a corresponding relation between the society and a state. So does it have a space for a conflict between the society and a state? And if it is a possibility, or is there any, by any account of a situation when a state can fight against the society, it becomes a troublesome situations. It becomes a difficult situations for the nation state to overcome this kind of a problem. In the last few months, we have seen a strong civil society has come out, a vibrant civil society has come out with an agenda to mitigate corruption from this country. In fact, this is one of the responsibilities of the state to provide not only services to the people, but provide services in a manner in which fair game is being played. But in the last 64 years, if we analyze the functioning of the government, we find that there is some lacuna, some problem, some casual, lenient approach, some bungling, some sort of misunderstanding have created a situation where the state does not follow the wishes, the needs of the people of this country. So what does it happen? It results into a conflicting situations. Anna Hazare, a staunch Gandhian, when he promised, when he started his movement to bring a strong Lokpal bill, according to him, that is a strong Jan Lokpal bill, it became a matter of conflict between civil society and a state. Here we need to understand how this situation and why this situation was created. We all know that a civil society means complete representations of the people of this country. The vibrancy of the civil society depends on the activities and involvement of this citizen of this country. And as we all know, we study in political science and other subject as well, civic culture. It needs a lot of time, it needs a proper ingredient in which a citizen of the country become a force to reckon with. Then it converts the civil society into a vibrant civil society where the citizen of this country are completely out and out in a position to understand the policies of the government, how the policy is being framed, why the policy is being framed, and how is it going to benefit the people of this country. But if the citizen is not in a position to understand all the contours, all the factors of policy making and policy implementations, then the physics, then the gap is being created. India is one of the developing countries in the real terms of definitions, where a large section of the society are still uneducated. Forget about the uneducated, still the literacy level is hanging around 68 to 70%. And we all know that there is a lot of difference between being illiterate and being educated. So semi-literate or literate people may not be in a position to understand the basic thrust of economic, social and political policies of the government. So they may not be in a position to criticize of the action of the government. So what they do, they are being fed by a certain section of the society which claim to be a true representative of the civil society to fight against the state. And that is what happening in India for the last many years. A huzoom, a crowd, a mob is being created on certain issues, whether it is issue of price rise or issue of Jan Lokpal bill or any other economic issues. It creates a mob which is unfed by the real reason of that cause. As certain farmers have committed suicide in Andhra Pradesh, or Chhattisgarh, or many other states. A civil society who claim to be a custodian of the society try to focus the issue without going into detail, without analyzing the proper reasons of the state action. They create a wall of the people against the state, and there the conflict becomes necessary between the conflict becomes a matter of concern for the nations. Likewise, in economic sphere as well, we can take the example of a special economic zone. This is another area which has changed the contours of conflict in India. A special economic zone is a demarcated area of a few thousand acres of land of farmers with a more liberal economic laws are being carved out. The purpose of a special economic zone is for more development, more business, more opportunities for the poor people. That is the policy of the government. And as we all know, let us get back, because SAG has created a conflicting situation between center between the state and the people of this country. How this conflict was created, it is a matter we all should know. On the one side, there is a large number of farmers who are living in the different part of the country, and still, as we understand, and it is a matter of fact, that agriculture is still the backbone of Indian economy. During the independence, more than 80% people were dependent on agriculture, but still more than 60% people are still dependent for their economy on agriculture. They survive on the thrust of agriculture productions. So what happens when the concept of new economic zone, which was started in India, this is a very new concept, process the government was talking, in fact, after the initiation of the new economic policies. But first time a major action was taken in 2000 by then Minister Murali Maran under the Vajpayee government, and later on an act was passed for the establishing a special economic zone in 2005, and it came into force in 2006. The purpose of economic zone is to accumulate, carve out certain areas of land in which they invite the foreign investor as well as a national investor under almost a very lenient law. The purpose is economic development, not only for this reason but of the country as well. They want to create new opportunities for job. They want FDI more in number. They want the people of that region become more prosperous. But by doing so, it has created a conflict of interest. And how it has created a conflict of interest, Nandigram is a glaring example before us. What happened in Nandigram in West Bengal in 2007 when a violent protest started taking place, which continued for more than a year and translated into a violent action. The government of West Bengal, they wanted to create a medical hub with the joint ventures of Indonesia. Almost 9 to 10,000 of acres of land were carved out from 29 villages of Nandigram. The West Bengal government that was run by the CPIM, they wanted that this SAG should become functional. Here, the agent of the people, which could be anybody but major agent of the people, the different political parties started speaking in different tones. The opposition parties made this a very important and delicate and sensitive issue. They created rumors that government is going to grab the lands of almost 10,000 acres of land from the 1929 villages of this area. That has definitely created a bad social as well as a political atmosphere in the Nandigram. We all know that some of the areas were already Naxal infested. So they came against the policies of the West Bengal government. In between, a lot of interest of conflict of the different political groups become pivotal. It became to dominate over each other. CPIM, it was reported that thousands of the CPIM cadres, those who wanted this SAG to be functional, they, in the disguise of the police uniform, they attacked on the Nandigram village, and a committee which was being formed against this act, Bhumi Pratirodhak Committee, was badly attacked by the cadres of the CPIM. On the other hand, opposition party created a situation in which affected farmers were opposing the policies of the government, the tooth and nail. So the opposition party created and started taking help of the Naxalites of the area, and now the fight has galvanized the complete society into two different parts. One, those who were supporting this SAG, another who were opposing this SAG on the name of the land grabbing. And this conflict had taken the lives of thousands of the people, and still the society is polarized. So SAG in India in the last 10 years has become the important component of a conflict. So in the recent terms, when we try to analyze the changing contours of conflict, this is one of the major area. Since 2000, government had a plan to create at least 64 SAG in all over India. Some of the SAG are functional. At least 31 SAG in the different parts of the country are functional, especially in Gujarat and Maharashtra. The Jamnagar episode, we all know about it. It was also, to a certain extent, became a matter of conflict between the farmers of Gujarat and the Gujarat government. But somehow it did not flare up to the extent as Nandigram had been. So here it was a fight between the state and the citizen of this country. When the citizen of this country started realizing that this state is not providing service to us, but the other hand has become a looter, has become a new imperialist force, then the situation of conflict becomes violent. When the Britishers ruled over India for more than 200 years, the civil society, our citizen of this country, did not have a power, did not have either economic or social or political power to revolt against them. So somehow they accepted the formula, they accepted the dominance of the Britishers. But if you read the book of history, the process of independence, in which different leaders played an important part, where Gandhi came in a different form and tried to exert the interest of the larger section of the society on the basis of satyagraha, which had succeeded in bringing independence, at the same time of forcing the Britishers to leave this country. But after the formulation of its own government, it becomes very difficult for the state, it becomes very difficult for the government to fight against its own people. But as we all know, that a situation of conflict develops because of the different reasons. When I try to explain the role of the civil society, there is one way that initiative, a voluntary action in which the self-interest is not involved. The Gandhi did not want that people of this two country, people of the two groups, or the citizen of this country fight against the state. There is the framers of the Indian constitutions, they also wanted that the conflicting situation should be at minimal level, because that is going to harp, that is going to affect the process of development. There is already a mechanism to resolve the conflict, and that is the mechanism, the political mechanism is general elections. So in every 5 years the election is going to be held. So if citizens of this country dislike the performance of the government, they can take the decision by not voting that particular policies or particular individuals of that political party. So a different set of new system will come, different set of other political parties will come to rule over this country. So the chances and situations of conflict will not arrive. But it has not been successful in doing so. So when the voluntary action has been grabbed by a voluntary organization to fight for on the cause of this country, it creates a situation of a conflict between the state and society. So this is one major area of changing contours of the conflict. Now, what are the other major areas of political conflicts in this country? Ideas of nation making is different altogether by different political leaders. After 1991, a new economic policy was initiated. A new economic policies was initiated with the concept that license Raj or permit Raj would be demolished. For the larger section of the society, the market should be open. Though it was done under the pressure of the foreign countries, it was done under the pressure of the Western countries, but it was open to the foreign investments. So without creating a level playing field, this state has opened the gates for others. It has created once again a conflicting situations. So after 1991 till 2011, if we analyze the economic developments, we find that rich are becoming richer, poor are becoming poorer. So social conflict within the state becomes much larger. We might have been watching, hearing and reading in the newspaper that a certain states, certain cities, they have become the hub of minor crimes. chain snatching, looting, and different kind of malpractices in India have been heard more and more. If you see how the society has changed, 20 or 30 years back or 40 years back, people did not used to lock their house. People did not used to create a iron gate before their house. If you see in a posh area, you will find rich people have more than 5 to 6 security gates. It is a matter of great concern. Whom do they scare of? And why do they scare of? Who is going to loot them? Who is going to kill them? There is a problem, a sociological angle. There is a need to understand this fact that this society is being divided between haves and have-nots. As somebody has so much money in India, there is a report that at least more than 2 to 3% people of India, they are so rich that they can have fun, they can have luxuries of lives in any parts of the world. On the other hand, 30 to 35% of the population of this country are so poor that they do not have resources to eat 2 times a day. India, if you see the index of the development, India on the many parameters far below than many undeveloped countries of the world. India has the largest number of malnourished children. India has the largest number of illiteracy. India has the largest number of child laborers. On many indicators, it shows that there is a still social gap on the basis of income, on the basis of other parameters of social, economic and political have not been bridged. The government successively of each political parties, irrespective of political ideology and political parties, they have not come to the terms to bring or bridge the gap between the poor and the rich. So definitely a conflict will remain intact. In the terms of Marx, when we talks about the class struggle, in every period, in every epoch, and a state is an instrument of exploitations of the poor, becomes true into the large extent of the explanation of this state functioning. So we cannot base, we cannot channelize the one particular ideology, whether it is Gandhian or Marxian or liberal state. But somehow the major function of the state is to mitigate poverty, mitigate the social gap, mitigate the political gap, disseminate all the negative parts within the society. But India has failed to do so in the last 64 years, and that is why the conflict remains still large and voluminous. Time to time, it erupts in economic terms, it erupts in political terms, and it erupts in other way as well. So what are the mechanism for resolving the conflict in the society? The most important component of resolving the conflict in the society is communications. If the communication is speedy, if the communication is to bring the both conflicting parties on the table and try to resolve, then it becomes easier for the state, or it becomes easier for the organizations which is trying to mitigate this conflicting situation, whether it has come out because of the political factors or economic factors or social factors. But by and large, the nation state which has started its process after independence has traveled almost for 64 years. It has on large extent failed to develop in mitigating the conflicting situation in this country. If the basic contours of conflicts are not resolved, are not understood, in the coming months and years and decades, it will come out in a different form, whether SAG is more SAG are created in this country or not. It will turn out in a form of Naxalism. It will come out in form of insurgency. It will come out in the form of non-violent protest, which was being seen in the last few months under the leadership of Anna Hazare and Ramdev Maharaj and many other followers. So it is a perception of the people of this country which was reflected on that particular issue. So a state needs to understand the diversity and the promises which were being made by the constitution makers, where they have tried to accommodate different ethnic groups, different sections of the society to have the share of power. So wherever the share of power is uneven and imbalance, the conflict will occur. As we all know that conflict is important for the process of the development of any society, of the nation. But the process of conflict should be peaceful. It should not be violent. If the compromise is not done on time, then this peaceful conflicts turns to be a violent. And very unfortunately, in India, major conflicts from peaceful movement to a violent movement, it has turned to be a violent movement, whether it is northeastern states, our Naxal problems, our SAG in Nandigram, in Noida, and many other areas have developed. It should have been, these all problems could have been accommodated, could have been sorted out through the proper channel of communication. Since it was not done, so inflamed and flared in the violent method. So it all kind of, definitely at the last we can say that a proper mechanism of conflict resolution should be ready in this country. We must anticipate this problem will aggravate into a violent method. So before it reaches to the violent method, the state must act speedily to resolve the matter through the peaceful means. Thank you.
Well, friends, in a today lecture, we saw how the conflict has, in different forms, been witnessed, has manifested itself in Indian society, and it has been always a problem, and the people are trying to resolve it. And for the resolution, as Dr. Kumar suggested, that it needs to proper communication and timely communication that will only mitigate or resolve the conflict in the society. For that, we will discuss tomorrow. We have a complete lecture on conflict and media. In tomorrow lecture, we'll see how the media has reflected the conflict in society and tried also to give some kind of solutions. And as you also know, this communication is not now only in a form of mouth to mouth, or it has also manifested in different way. Different sort of communication are there. So we'll try to picture out in tomorrow lecture how the conflict and media have been how conflict in media have been portrayed. So I thank today for the in-depth lecture on this forms of conflicts, whether in the form of social, political, economy, as Dr. Kumar has tried to pass on all of us, and has tried to also give some kinds of we can say a kind of incisive analysis that will be helpful for us to understand that topic conflict in India. With this, we would like to conclude the lecture today, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture. On his behalf, I thank Dr. Satish Kumar for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.